Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something that I think is really relevant to, well, pretty much everyone, to be honest.
Hmm.
And that's how to make change actually work, like in
Right,
organizations.
like actually work, not just like, check a box and move on.
Exactly. Real, lasting change. And to help us dig into this, we're diving into some really cool research from Dr. Jesus E. Delgado Morales.
An expert in bringing together, the world of project management with change leadership.
And even AI, like the emotionally intelligent kind.
Yeah, which might sound counterintuitive, but we'll get to that.
Right.
He's with Atlantic International University, or AIU,
AIU.
and he's done some fascinating work on how organizations can actually, navigate all the complexity that comes with change.
And make it work, like actually work for everybody involved.
Mm.
And the title of his research, which we'll be unpacking today, really says it all.
It does.
From projects to purpose. A human-centered integration of Project DPro and N.W.S navigation in the age of AI.
That's a mouthful.
It is. But don't worry, we'll break it all down.
Yeah, we'll unpack it all for you.
So our goal today is to really get into the nitty-gritty of how Dr. Delgado sees these two things, Project DPro and N.E.W.S navigation working together.
To create a more effective and really a more human approach to leading and managing change.
In this world that's, just constantly throwing curveballs at us.
Exactly.
So first things first, what exactly is Project DPro?
Okay, so Project DPro, it comes from PM4NGOs, and essentially it's a really structured, clear framework for managing projects,
Okay.
specifically in the development and humanitarian fields. But honestly, a lot of the principles apply anywhere.
Right,
So
right.
think of it kind of like a step-by-step guide.
Oh.
You've got your identify phase where you figure out, like, what are we trying to achieve here?
Right.
Then you move into design, where you actually start fleshing out the project. Then plan, where you map everything out, like your timelines, your resources,
All the details.
all the details. Then, of course, implement, actually doing the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, close, where you wrap it all up.
Tie up loose ends, learn from the experience.
Exactly.
That's DPro. And it sounds like it gives you that, solid structure for managing projects effectively.
Yeah, the backbone.
The backbone.
Now, N.E.W.S navigation is where things get a little more, well,
Interesting.
let's say nuanced,
Yeah.
because it really focuses on the people side of change.
Okay. I like that.
It's all about like leadership alignment, making sure everybody's on the same page,
Mm-hmm.
empowering individuals to be part of the change, and even creating those cultural shifts within organizations that are so essential for lasting transformation.
So less about the process, more about the people.
Yeah. And it uses this really cool compass metaphor
I'm intrigued.
with 4 directions:
Yeah.
north, east, west, and south.
Okay.
So north represents vision. Like, what's the big picture here? What are we trying to achieve together?
Got it.
East is all about motivation. Why are we doing this? What's driving us? How do we keep that energy going?
I see where this is going.
West is planning, not just in the logistical DPro sense, but also in terms of how do our individual actions align with the overall strategy.
Okay.
And then south is all about barriers. What's holding us back? What limiting beliefs or cultural roadblocks do we need to overcome?
Oh, I like that.
It's really about helping people navigate all those messy, complex emotions that come with change.
Which, let's be honest, most traditional approaches kind of ignore.
Yeah. They just pretend they don't exist.
Right. They're all about process and just checking boxes. But real change is messy. It's emotional.
Yeah, exactly. People have feelings.
People have feelings.
And those feelings matter.
They do.
Because if you ignore them, they'll sabotage your best laid plans every time.
It's true. I've seen that happen so many times.
So what Dr. Delgado's done is he's taken these 2 approaches, Project DPro with its structure and N.W.S navigation with its focus on human emotions.
And he's like, how can we bring these together?
Exactly. To create this hybrid approach that's both rigorous and empathetic.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
So on one hand, you've got the DPro framework, making sure things are done effectively and efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, you've got N.E.W.S navigation, ensuring that people are engaged, motivated, and truly aligned with the purpose of the change.
I mean, that sounds like a pretty powerful combination.
It is. And it's particularly relevant, I think, now in the age of AI.
Right, because that's adding a whole other layer of complexity to how we work and live.
Exactly. And how we manage change.
So what led Dr. Delgado to explore this integration in the first place?
What's really interesting is that at the core of his work is this belief that projects are not just about, outputs and deadlines.
No.
He sees them as vehicles for actual social transformation.
Oh, wow. That's a big idea.
Yeah, and he felt like so many organizations, they get so bogged down in the mechanics of project
The
management.
processes,
Yeah,
the tools.
they kind of forget about the human beings
And
involved.
they miss the forest for the trees. So he was seeing like a real gap between, how projects are traditional managed and this idea of projects as a force for positive change.
Yeah, and he felt that by ignoring the human element, organizations were missing out on a huge opportunity.
To really create meaningful, lasting change.
Right. Change that actually benefits everyone, not just the bottom line.
So what kind of human element are we talking about specifically?
Well, think about it. When change happens, people naturally have questions.
Yeah, of course.
They have doubts. Some might be excited, others might be scared.
Or resistant.
Right. And if those feelings aren't acknowledged and addressed, it can lead to all sorts of problems, like lack of buy-in,
Yeah.
resistance,
Yeah.
conflicts, delays, you name it.
And ultimately, the change initiative just doesn't achieve what it set out to do.
It fizzles out.
It fizzles out.
So Dr. Delgado saw this disconnect and thought, we need a better way.
Yeah, a more holistic way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where his integration of DPro and N.E.W.S navigation comes in.
So how does he actually bring those two together?
Okay, well, on the one hand, you have DPro, which gives you that clear framework, that structure, to ensure that things are done effectively.
Right, those 5 phases.
Exactly. Identify, design, plan, implement, close.
Yeah, that's your roadmap.
Your roadmap. And then, layered on top of that, you have N.W.S navigation, which adds this essential layer of emotional intelligence.
Okay. Right.
So with the north direction, you're constantly reminding yourself and your team, okay, what's the vision here?
What's the big picture we're all working towards?
Exactly. Keeping everyone connected to the purpose.
Mhm.
Then, east, motivation.
Mm.
This is about understanding what drives people.
What keeps them engaged?
Exactly. And it's also about creating that sense of shared purpose, that collective energy that's so essential for, getting things done.
Right, because change is hard.
It is.
You need that fuel to keep going.
Absolutely. Then, west, planning. This is where you get really strategic. It's about making sure everyone's actions are aligned, that everyone understands how their individual piece fits into the overall puzzle.
So it's planning, but it's also like communication and collaboration.
Yeah, it's all connected. And finally, south. This is where you get real about the challenges.
The barriers.
Yeah. What limiting beliefs are holding us back,
Mm-hmm.
what cultural norms are getting in the way. And this dimension, it gives you the tools to identify those roadblocks and figure out how to overcome them.
So it's not about pretending those things don't exist.
No, it's about facing them head on.
Because they're real.
They are.
They're part of the process.
And by acknowledging them, by working through them, you actually strengthen the change initiative.
So I'm seeing how these two things, DPro and N.E.W.S, work together.
Yeah, they complement each other.
They each bring something really important to the table.
It's not about choosing one or the other.
It's about bringing them together.
To create this more holistic, more human-centered approach.
And a more effective one, I imagine.
I think so, yes.
So what was Dr. Delgado trying to uncover with his research?
Well, his primary goal was really to figure out how this integration of DPro and N.W.S could actually improve change management in real-world settings.
Okay, so he wasn't just theorizing.
No.
Yeah.
He wanted to see how it worked in practice.
In organizations like the ones listening right now.
Yeah, exactly.
So to get there, he had a few key research questions he was trying to answer, right?
Yeah, he had 3 main ones. The first was, what are the similarities and differences between these two methodologies?
DPro and N.E.W.S,
Yeah.
like where do they overlap? Where do they diverge?
Exactly. The second was, okay, assuming they can work together,
Mm-hmm.
how do you actually integrate them into one cohesive framework?
Right. Like practically speaking, how do you do that?
And then the third question was, okay, what are the actual benefits for organizations?
If they use this integrated model.
Right. Does it actually lead to more effective change?
More sustainable change.
More meaningful change, even?
Okay, so those are the big questions driving his research.
Yeah, they are.
And how did he actually go about answering them?
Well, he took a qualitative and applied research approach.
Okay, what does that mean exactly?
So basically, instead of just looking at numbers and statistics, he was really focused on getting a deep understanding of how these two methodologies work
Mm-hmm.
and how they could be integrated in a way that's actually useful for people.
So more about the why and the how,
Exactly.
rather than just the what.
And to do this, he used a bunch of different methods.
Like?
Well, first he did a comparative analysis.
Okay.
So he really dug deep into both DPro and N.E.W.S.
Looking at their underlying principles.
Their tools, their strengths, their weaknesses.
Their processes.
Yeah, the whole shebang.
To see like how they fit together.
Exactly. Okay. And then he developed some really cool case studies.
Interesting.
Of organizations that were actually going through change.
So real-world examples.
Yeah, to see how these ideas played out in practice.
Okay, that's cool.
And crucially, he went out into the field.
He got his hands dirty.
Yeah, he did. He observed people in action.
Like actually managing projects, leading change initiatives.
And he interviewed them to get their perspective, their insights.
You know, what worked, what didn't, what were the challenges?
Exactly. So he wasn't just sitting in an ivory tower.
No.
He was really engaging with the people who were actually doing this work.
Day in and day out.
Yeah.
And he also looked specifically at the tools that each methodology offers, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So from DPro, he looked at things like the logical framework.
Or the log frame?
Yeah, the log frame.
Which is basically a way to visually map out your project.
Yeah, like your goals, your activities, your indicators of success.
Makes it easier to see the whole picture.
Yeah. He also looked at the project charter,
mm-hmm.
which defines the scope of the project, stakeholder engagement plans.
Which are super important.
Essential.
Because change impacts so many people.
It does.
And risk registers.
To help you anticipate and manage potential problems.
Which, let's face it, there are always potential problems.
Oh.
And then on the N.E.W.S navigation side, he looked at tools like personal compass workshops.
Yeah, where individuals can really explore their own values and motivations.
In relation to the change.
Exactly. And how they can best contribute.
Okay.
Vision to action planning maps.
Which help translate that big vision into concrete steps.
Yeah. And then some really cool techniques for like identifying and overcoming obstacles.
Those limiting beliefs we were talking about.
Yeah, the things that can really hold us back.
Both individually and as a team.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so he had a good grasp on the practical aspects of both methodologies.
He did.
And then he brought them together in this 5-dimensional integration model.
Yeah. And each dimension links a key element of DPro with a corresponding element of N.W.S.
Okay, let's break that down.
So the first dimension is strategic direction.
Strategic direction.
And here, he connects the project identification phase of DPro.
So like the very beginning, where you're figuring out what the project is actually about.
Yeah, with the north of N.E.W.S, which is all about vision.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So it's about making sure, right from the start, that your project is aligned with the organization's overall vision.
Its values, its strategic goals.
Exactly. And a key part of this is developing a theory of change.
A theory of change.
Which basically outlines, like, how your project activities are actually going to lead to your desired outcomes.
Like the logic behind it.
Yeah. So you're not just doing things randomly.
Everything is connected to that bigger picture.
Precisely.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then the second dimension is motivation and culture.
Motivation and culture.
Yeah. And this links DPro's emphasis on stakeholder participation.
Which is so crucial.
Absolutely.
You can't just impose change on people.
No.
You have to bring them along.
Yeah, involve them in the process.
Make them feel like they're part of it.
Exactly. And it also connects with team dynamics.
So like how the team functions, how they communicate.
Yeah, how they work together. And he links this with the east of N.W.S, which is all about purpose and motivation.
Okay, so creating that shared energy.
That sense of, like, we're all in this together.
We're all rowing in the same direction.
Yeah, and we believe in what we're doing.
And we're excited about it.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's dimension 2. What about dimension 3?
All right, so dimension 3 is planning and execution.
Planning and execution. Sounds pretty straightforward.
Yeah, this is where DPro really shines.
With its focus on, timelines, budgets, risk management.
All those practical things.
Yeah.
And he links this with the west of N.W.S.
Which is also about planning, right?
It is, but it's about planning in a more, strategic way.
Okay, how so?
Well, it's about making sure that everyone understands how their work
Mm-hmm.
contributes to the overall strategy.
So it's not just about, checking off tasks on a to-do list.
No, it's about understanding the why behind those tasks.
How they fit into the bigger picture.
Exactly. And it's also about being able to adapt.
Because things change.
Yeah, they always do.
Plans need to evolve.
And this dimension gives you the tools to do that.
Okay, so that's dimension 3. And then dimension 4 gets into, the more challenging aspects of change, right?
Yeah, this one is called emotional resistance.
Emotional resistance. Because let's face it, change is hard.
Either
People resist it.
Naturally. So this dimension links DPro's focus on issue logs.
Where you track problems that arise.
Yeah, and change control processes.
To manage, like, any modifications that need to be made?
Right. And he links this with the south of the N.E.W.S, which is all about identifying and overcoming those limiting beliefs.
And cultural barriers.
That can really hinder change. So it's about acknowledging that resistance is normal.
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then figuring out how to work through it.
In a way that's constructive, you know, that actually brings people together.
Instead of pushing them further apart.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's dimension 4. And then the final dimension, dimension 5,
is adaptive learning.
Adaptive learning. So like learning as you go.
Exactly. Making adjustments along the way. And this dimension connects DPro's MEAL framework. Monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning. Which is all about tracking progress.
What?
Gathering data, learning from your experiences.
That's making improvements based on what you're learning.
Right. And he links this with N.E.W.S navigation's emphasis on reflection loops.
Okay, so like taking the time to step back.
Yeah, and reassess.
See what's working, what's not.
And then make adjustments to your approach.
So it's a really dynamic process.
It is.
Not just like set it and forget it.
No, it's about constantly evolving and adapting.
Okay, so this 5-dimensional model, it's really comprehensive.
It is.
It addresses like all the key aspects of change management.
I think so.
From the technical to the human.
Yeah.
So what are some of the key benefits that organizations can expect if they adopt this model?
Well, Dr. Delgado highlights a few key advantages. One is increased organizational agility.
Agility.
Yeah.
So like being able to adapt quickly to change.
Yeah, to be flexible and responsive.
Which in today's world is essential.
Essential for survival, I think. Another benefit is stronger team coherence.
So like everyone's on the same page, working together effectively.
Yeah, there's that shared understanding of the vision, the goals.
And everyone feels valued and heard.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then another key benefit is leadership integrity.
Meaning?
So it's about leaders walking the talk.
Not just like talking about change, but actually embodying it.
Yeah, and being authentic and transparent throughout the process. And this builds trust, you know.
Absolutely.
Which is essential for any kind of change initiative.
It is.
And, you know, Dr. Delgado specifically points out how valuable this integrated model can be in like really high pressure situations.
Like what?
Well, things like disaster recovery efforts.
Oh, yeah, where things are chaotic and you need to act fast.
Yeah, and you need everyone to be working together effectively.
Or large-scale digital transformations.
Which are becoming more and more common.
Yeah, and those can be really disruptive.
To people's work, to their sets of security.
Yeah, to their whole way of life sometimes.
So having this framework can really help guide organizations through those challenging times.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the human side of change.
We have.
But the title of Dr. Delgado's research also mentions AI.
Yeah.
So how does that fit into this whole picture?
Well, this is a really interesting aspect of his work.
Okay, tell me more.
Because he emphasizes that AI, while powerful, should always be used in a way that's aligned with human values.
So not just like throwing AI at a problem and hoping for the best?
No. It's about being really intentional about how you use it.
And making sure it's actually serving human needs.
Yeah, and not the other way around.
He actually has a great quote about this, doesn't he?
Yeah, he says, AI must serve human purpose, not replace it.
Which I think is really important to keep in mind, especially as AI becomes more and more integrated into our lives.
Absolutely. And it's really relevant to change management.
Yeah, because you can imagine AI being used to, like, automate tasks or analyze data.
Yeah. But if that's done without considering the human impact,
it can backfire.
It can. So Dr. Delgado sees AI as a tool.
A powerful tool.
Yeah, but a tool that needs to be used thoughtfully and ethically.
And always with the goal of supporting human well-being.
Exactly. So, for example, he talks about how AI can be used for predictive analytics.
Okay.
To help you anticipate potential risks or understand how different stakeholders might react to change.
So like getting ahead of potential problems.
Yeah, and being more proactive. He also talks about stakeholder sentiment tracking.
Interesting.
So like using AI to actually gauge how people are feeling about the change.
In real time.
Yeah, which can be really valuable for making adjustments along the way.
So if you see like a lot of negativity or fear,
you can address it directly.
Before it becomes a bigger problem.
Exactly. He also sees a role for AI in dynamic scenario planning.
So like using AI to model different potential outcomes?
Yeah, to explore different possibilities and help you make more informed decisions.
Okay. That makes sense.
And then he also talks about using AI within the meal cycle.
That monitoring and evaluation framework we talked about.
Yeah, to make that process more efficient and insightful.
Okay, so really using AI to support continuous learning and improvement.
Yeah, exactly.
And all of this, of course, needs to be done in a way that's aligned with the organization's values.
Absolutely.
Its ethical principles, its purpose.
You can't just let the AI run wild.
No, you need that human oversight.
To make sure it's being used for good.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the goal is to build organizations that are not only technologically advanced,
but also emotionally intelligent.
Yeah, and ethically grounded.
Organizations that are self-aware and resilient.
That can adapt and thrive in this complex world.
That sounds like a pretty great goal to me.
It is. It's a vision worth striving for.
Absolutely. So this research that we've been talking about, it's not just an academic exercise.
No, it's not.
It has real-world implications.
Yeah, for organizations of all shapes and sizes.
So what are some of the key contributions that Dr. Delgado has made through his work?
Well, from an academic perspective, he's really pushed the boundaries of change management theory.
How so?
Well, he's created this unique framework.
This 5-dimensional model we've been talking about.
Yeah, that bridges the gap between traditional, technical approaches to change and the human-centered emotional aspects of change.
Which are so often ignored.
Yeah, and by bringing those two together, he's created a more holistic and effective approach.
And he's also, provided a really clear roadmap for transformational leadership.
Yeah, a leadership that's not just about, giving orders and expecting people to follow.
But about inspiring and empowering people.
To create change together. And he draws on all sorts of cool ideas, like systems thinking and neuro-leadership.
Okay, and what about for practitioners?
So for the people who are actually doing this work on the ground, he's created some really practical tools and resources.
Right what?
Well, he's developed training modules for project and program managers.
Oh, that's helpful.
Yeah, to help them understand and apply his framework. He's also created coaching templates that use the N.E.W.S compass.
The north, east, west, south.
Yeah, to guide conversations about change.
So a practical way to use that model in real-world situations.
Exactly. And he's even developed change readiness assessments.
Interesting.
That combine elements of both DPro and N.E.W.S.
So you can actually measure how prepared an organization is for change.
Yeah, and identify areas where they might need some extra support.
Okay, so a lot of practical resources that people can actually use.
Yeah, he's really committed to bridging the gap between theory and practice.
That's great. And I think that's what makes his work so valuable.
Yeah, it's not just an abstract idea.
It's something that people can actually apply to their work.
To make a real difference.
So as we wrap up our deep dive today, what's the key takeaway that Dr. Delgado wants us to remember?
I think it's the power of integrating these two seemingly different approaches.
The structured DPro and the more human-centered N.W.S navigation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because together, they create a change process that's not only more effective, but also more meaningful, more sustainable, and ultimately, I think, more human.
And he actually sums this up really beautifully in his concluding statement, doesn't he?
Yeah, he says, we can only transform the world if we first transform the way we lead projects with heart, with strategy, and with courage.
With heart, with strategy, and with courage.
Yeah. And I think that really captures the essence of his work.
It does. It's about recognizing that projects, change initiatives, they're not just about tasks and deadlines. They're about people.
Yeah, they're about human beings working together to create something better.
And that requires both a clear plan and a deep understanding of the human experience.
Exactly. It's about leading with both your head and your heart.
So by blending these methodologies, and by being mindful of how we use AI,
we can create organizations that are more resilient,
more humane,
more capable of achieving lasting change.
And ultimately, I think, more fulfilling to be a part of.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about creating a world where work is not just about, getting things done,
but about making a real difference.
And feeling good about it.
Feeling good about it.
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
And I think that's a great note to end on. So as you go about your day today, think about how you can bring more heart, more strategy, and more courage into your own work.
And into your life.
And into your life.
Because change is all around us.
It is.
And if we can learn to embrace it, to lead it with both our heads and our hearts, we can create a world that's truly better for everyone.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone. We'll see you next time.